Hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Why Advocate. This is a show where we highlight the works of student advocates and what they're doing to make their communities a better place. My name is of course Charlie Martin, and thank you for being here. Today we have a special guest and a good friend of mine. I'm sitting with Andrea, or Andy LePage, to talk about student governance and the importance of engagement at universities across Ontario. Andy is a former Brock University Student Union and BUSU executive. She sat as the Vice President of University Affairs and has a long-standing experience with student governance. She talks to me today about her time in student governance and how it shaped who she is today. We talk about voter turnout, student engagement, and what it means to be an advocate. Hey, welcome back everybody. I am now with Andy LePage. Andy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me, Charlie.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I had a really good experience with you last year with BUSU and being on OUSA with you. For those who don't know, I was a delegate last year for the fall General Assembly, and I advocated alongside Andy for Brock University Student Union. Andy, do you want to describe a little bit about yourself? Like, maybe let's start off, where did you grow up? Let's start with that.
Yeah, I originally grew up in Essex, Ontario, which is a smaller town outside of Windsor. Pretty small town type of vibe. And then I ended up moving to St. Catharines and went to Brock University with Charlie for political science for the last 5 years I had been in St. Catharines. And then now I'm continuing my education and I'm currently in Toronto. So again, a lot of big steps and big moves.
What are you studying in Toronto?
So I will be starting in September the Masters of Public Policy and Administration. So very similar to what OUSA does in terms of policy and what I was doing in my previous role for the student union at Brock.
So talking about Brock and your experience at it, maybe I could ask you first, why did you choose Brock University? What got you involved there?
Yeah, me going away was actually a really big decision. I had a lot of conversations with my parents about my post-secondary education, being away from home, because again, like I mentioned, I grew up in a very small town. So moving to St. Catharines at the time seemed like a really big step for me because it is bigger than Essex. However, when I did my first campus tour at Brock, I just really felt like it was a great mix between a small community, but it was also very new and exciting and big for me. And so it really allowed me to have kind of the best of both worlds there. And I really just enjoyed the overall focus on experience and student experience at Brock.
You were part of Brock University Student Union as a VPUA last year. You are definitely involved in student politics. You wrote an article for OUSA last year on the importance of student governance. Maybe I could ask you, why did you choose student governance? With the array of many clubs there is at various different universities, what got you involved with politics and governance?
Yeah, so I would say generally for student governance, I got involved, I guess, kind of late. I didn't end up getting involved with BUSU until my fourth year when I ended up running for a VP position. But I'd always been really involved, whether that had been in high school or even during my undergraduate degree. I'd just been involved in different ways, whether that be sports or clubs or on my own personal time. But what really made me want to go into student governance was my experience at Brock. I really enjoyed, again, that student experience aspect of it. And what really drove me was wanting to make that better and giving that to other students, like Charlie. And I, again, at the end of the day, just really wanted to build on what had been given to me and try to better that.
Being a former student in student governance and having the experience and understanding the roles of what it takes to be a student advocate, what were some of the challenges that you faced advocating for students, and what was, maybe you could give some insight on what it actually means to be a student advocate and how that affected you.
Yeah, so there definitely was a lot of challenges, especially again, like I mentioned, I started later per se, and my involvement with student governance because I didn't start until my fourth year, and technically officially after I graduated in my position. But I would say that while the traditional form of being like in student advocacy would be through the student union, or even I guess the university senate as well. I think I was a student advocate even before I was formally involved. I think just being a student advocate means really supporting change or supporting policy or supporting just the betterment of whatever, I guess, system you were looking at. And I think I really did that in different ways throughout maybe just my faculty in the school or even again, my club involvement. But when I did start in student advocacy, in the more formal sense through the student union, it was kind of overwhelming at first, if I'm going to be honest, because I did start later. There's a lot of different systems and there's a lot of different dynamics that you kind of have to understand. So just how the student union functions and because it is separate from the university, what the relationship is like there and how change does happen. Um, it was a big stepping stone for me to kind of understand that, and change takes a long time. And it happens after many people and many, I guess, generations and years and attempts at trying to make that change. So understanding that everything that I'm doing in my job, they might seem little or they might seem like it's not having the big effect that you want it to, but staying consistent and staying resilient was a huge part of something that I had to build and learn throughout my time because it can get exhausting. It is, especially when you care about things, it can be very emotionally draining. So just really staying strong and kind of focused on why you were doing what you're doing is really important. Because like I said, change doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen through one meeting. It's consistent and over a long time.
I guess as a segue to that, what were some of, I guess, in your time as being the VPUA, what were some of the things that you wanted to accomplish in your time, and what did you accomplish, whether that be like setting the groundwork for something or by completing something? What were you able to do in your time?
Yeah, so my journey, even within my position, is very interesting. When I first got elected, I ran for the vice president, finance and administration, which is now the university affairs position. So when I was running, I noticed there was a pretty big gap between internal advocacy. We had an external affairs position, which really dealt with kind of external advocacy. And I thought that the internal piece, whether that be directly to the university or to students or just within the organization, was missing. So a lot of my job this year was figuring out what that looked like and kind of laying the groundwork for that. So there was a lot of services, there was a lot of policies and just review that happened within what my position even looked like. But um, I got to work on a number of things, which was really awesome because I think the internal advocacy piece is so broad. That can include in the University Senate, which has to do with more academic facing, and the student services piece, which one of the big things that I'm really proud of this year. And again, advocacy cannot just happen through one person. So this is a team effort for sure. But we started a legal aid clinic this year, which was super awesome for students. So they can come and ask their questions. And again, it's a really good resource for students because legal aid is very expensive. We also worked with Brock, so the university, to start a OER grant program, and OER stands for Open Educational Resource, because textbooks and affordability for materials is quite expensive for students. So the student union worked with the university to donate a grant, which will allow professors to implement OERs into their courses and save student money. And then another thing is our Food First program. And again, we noticed a huge issue of food insecurity on campus. And so really kind of figuring out unique and innovative ways to build support and build funding for that was something that I got to work on as well this year. And all of those things are nowhere near finished or nowhere near where they need to be. But being able to lay the groundwork through, I guess, the new position that I implemented was something I'm really proud of. And another thing is as well, just really focusing on the internal advocacy piece, which means student engagement. You can't advocate for students if you don't know what they want or what they need. And getting to work on these services is great, but if you don't know what students need or want and getting that feedback and really listening to what they're saying, it's kind of hard to properly implement those. So again, we're just really refocusing on building student awareness and student involvement was something I focused on this year and I'm proud of.
You wrote an article titled "The Importance of Giving a," and I want to talk to you about that. And what made you want to write that article? Let's start with that.
Yeah, so this article came from a time where we had just held in our March election and a referendum. And we noticed that the voter turnout was really low. We actually didn't reach quorum, which means a certain threshold of percentage of students voting in an election to pass the referendums that were at hand. And it really made me wonder why and what that stems from. I did use a very crude word to kind of title the blog. However, it's basically about why students aren't engaged or seem to not be engaged. And in my opinion, it really does come down to what ground has been laid for students to be able to do that. A lot of students have come out of COVID. A lot of students started in COVID. And so that means that a lot of experiences and opportunities to engage on campus, whether that be just in events or clubs or even advocacy, has really been stifled, I guess, because of the pandemic. But even before then, I feel like it is very common, and it's a very common misconception, that students don't care or students aren't engaged. And I simply disagree. I think that isn't true. I think maybe the measurement of engagement is being viewed through a black and white lens, where voter turnout or I guess involvement can be used to gauge that, sure. But I think students are a lot more engaged and they care a lot more than they're being given credit for, and in a traditional way. I think being an advocate, like we've been talking about and like this entire podcast is about, isn't simply someone who is in my position or who was in my position. I think any student can be an advocate. And students do care. They are giving money to an institution, they give money to student unions. And I think they aren't given enough credit a lot of the time for the amount that they do care and the amount that they know and the value that they can add to advocacy. As long as you care and as long as you are passionate about an issue, I think you're an advocate and you're a student advocate. I think it is the job of institutions, whether that be post-secondary institutions, whether that be governments, whether that be student unions, to try different things to engage students. Because same thing with advocacy measures, not one thing is going to solve every single issue. You have to try multiple ways. It takes multiple generations. It takes multiple people to really get to the end goal. And I think the same with engagement. You can't just try to tell people to vote and then expect that to happen. Students are exhausted, frankly. I think that's just a common theme over university students, especially. They're tired. And I think especially with how exhausting advocacy can be, it is tough to get them to take on issues that are even more exhausting. But I think it really is the job of student leaders and those in student governance to engage students and continue trying, because that's who you are serving.
I really like the one point that you brought up there, that it's not just the elected official, it's not just the elected student who can be an advocate. All of us can be. And I think with social media now today, I think, as students, we are all given that platform to speak what's on our mind and to advocate for others who are voiceless. And so I really like that point that you brought up, and just at the end of what you just talked about is that we need to engage more students and student governance. How do we do that? As you mentioned, our voter turnout rates are very, very low across all the 10 schools that OUSA represents. How do we change this? How do we get student engagement back up?
Yeah, so in my article, I believe I saw a range from OUSA schools anyway, so Ontario universities, between 3.28% and 17%, with the 17% being a little bit of an outlier, but it's generally on average around 10% of undergraduate students voting in these elections. And yes, it is a very large question of how do we get student engagement? And I did kind of mention it a little bit before. I don't think there is necessarily one way to do that. The same way as there's no one way to advocate. Getting students involved requires a large variety of opportunities and consistent opportunities as well. Because what piques my interest to get involved, and what piques your interest, Charlie, to get involved, and what piques anyone who's listening interest to get involved, and what we care about varies, because we're all different. And the same with our advocacy measures as well. So I think, while it is a big question, like you mentioned, social media is great. Our generation, and just looking at the history of what advocacy efforts there has been, even outside of student governance, just looking at advocacy in general, social media is a really great platform to advocate. It's amplifying your voice, it's publicly available, and it can really get the point across that you're trying to make. Another way is providing different opportunities. So like I mentioned, there is the traditional way of going about being involved with student governance, sitting on university senate, sitting on a board of directors, lobbying, but there is also other ways as well. Just talking to people, going out and sharing your feelings and your opinions with other students, connecting in that way, networking in that way. Even as a student leader, I found a really effective way is just going and talking to people, hearing their opinion, and then amplifying that for them. At the end of the day, yes, was I the one maybe bringing the issues forward? Yes, but does that make them any less of an advocate because they care and they share that? No. So again, there is tons of different ways you can do that. You can blog, you can listen to podcasts, but I think one way to really engage people too is just to continue your own advocacy. because the more you know, the more you educate yourself, and the more you have empathy and for others and for different situations, I think it just makes you a better advocate. And I think that kind of just spreads to other people as well.
I really like the points you brought up there. All of them are extremely valid. And I really liked what you said about, in order to engage with people, it's as simple as just starting a conversation. I think one thing that, COVID kind of ended for all of us is having that, face-to-face conversation. And I think especially as student advocates, a lot of the time when you're campaigning for an elected position or whatever, you need to have that in-person conversation, and you want to have people like listen to what you're saying, but also so they can also talk about it, and it just branches off and everybody's becoming super aware of this issue. And I think that's how our engagement has gone down over time, is a result of COVID. I know we're running out of time, so I'm just going to ask you quickly for let's just pretend here, let's say you're back in first year of university again. What would you tell yourself going into advocacy? What are some things that like you wish you knew?
Yeah, if I could go back and talk to first year me, I would say to not be afraid to try different things. I think it is just as important to know what you don't like as much as what you do like. And a lot of the opportunities that I've gotten, whether that be through my education, through my career, or through my advocacy, have come from me just taking a chance and getting involved. I always make the joke that I always accidentally fall into opportunities, and I would attribute that to just getting involved. Because once you kind of open that door and you find like-minded people and you find people that support you and have the same passion as you, it really does just take you when you enjoy what you're doing and when you are passionate about it, you find more opportunities to discover yourself and to find even more things. And I think in first year, especially, it's a little bit scary to get involved because you feel like you have no idea what you're doing, you have no idea what's happening, and you aren't really confident that you can do what others are doing. But I think comparing yourself to what others are doing or not believing in yourself can really stop that growth. And I think I've grown the most when I felt like I go in completely unprepared for a situation or completely new to a situation. So just really take a chance. And if you don't like it, that's cool too. At least you know that. And then you can focus on the things that you do like.
Nice. Okay. Well, Andy, thank you for your time today. Is there any like last remarks that you would want to say to the listeners today?
I just wanna thank you first off for inviting me to speak today. I still feel very honored that I was given the chance to have the experiences I did the last year and really find out a lot about myself and the students trusting me to advocate for them. But I think it's important for people to know that no matter where you are at in your advocacy journey, you are valid and you are making a difference as much as it doesn't feel like it. So don't give up. Continue to keep advocating for what you're passionate about and keep working hard for it.
Well, thank you. And all right. Bye, everyone.